You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud on Wednesday the 22nd of May. Look, it's the podcast that's had 101 million downloads now, everybody. We want to thank you for that. And now one more because you're listening to us. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Leah Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, a viral portrait of an Australian woman that's suffering from something called the Streisand Effect. Also, why you should just start shouting snow globe at people halfway through a conversation. And Scarlett Johannson is at war with a fake version of herself and stop the world we want to get off. But first, Mia Freedman.
In case you missed it, former Top Gear host Jeremy Clarkson has been voted the sexiest man in the UK, and it's prompted the world to ask British women, are you okay?
The answer being no.
Holly, defend your people.
Mate, this is a very hard one to defend, but I think some context is needed. Who voted him?
Okay.
What group of humans was this?
So there were 2,000 female members of a dating site called Illicit Encounters. I mean, so it's not like an official referendum, let's be clear.
And I think the website was for people having affairs.
It
is fine.
I think that
it is, like Ashley
gives
Madison.
us the context we need.
Well, so they were given 50 male celebrities on their sexiness from 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. And this is actually the second year in a row that Clarkson has won the number one title. In second place this year was Tom Holland,
who could not be more different than Jeremy Clarkson.
I always get the Toms confused. And in third place was His Royal Highness Prince William.
So, Holly, can you please explain? You're from the UK, so you're our correspondent.
Haven't lived there for 25
and I'm sure you're
years,
also
but anyway.
on Illicit Encounters, the website.
Well,
so
I've got two more people you might be interested to know in. The first person I find moderately attractive is Idris Elba, who was number 6.
Gorgeous. Nothing more.
He's a hottie. And Prince Harry was down at 47. Please continue.
So we're busy objectifying the men.
Yes, but Holly, what I need to know is why this context explains Jeremy Clarkson.
So Jeremy Clarkson, lots of you know him as being an awful person because he makes headlines for doing things like saying awful things about Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, that he would like to see her stripped naked and walk through the streets while people throw things at her, that kind of stuff. He's also very conservative and outspokenly so not very right on when it comes to things like his position on Brexit, for example.
Yeah.
And the other important piece of context here, though, is that he is currently on one of the most popular shows in Britain, which is basically a reality show that shows him setting up a farm. Now, Clarkson's Farm is in season 2, and inexplicably and against all odds, it is one of the most watched shows in Britain. So I think that what the Clarkson being an illicit encounter that British women want, and I don't think it answers the question, are you okay, is he's grumpy.
Oh, that's what you want in a partner.
He's conservative, he's very masculine, but unfortunately, he's funny.
Right.
Okay.
Because I'm not in the business of saying who is and is not sexy. You can vote for who you want. But I do think that there is something revealing about the fact that this man does not have a good track record with women, got into a physical altercation on the set of Top Gear, I think. Like, he is so full of controversies, but they don't seem to have tarnished his image at all, not even with women.
No. I think, in fact, people quite like it. There's been a storm brewing around Gina Rinehart's face for over a week now, and it's reached some quite interesting heights. The very conservative mining magnate has been trying to get a portrait of herself removed from Canberra's National Gallery, ostensibly because she thinks it's unflattering. She isn't actually on the record as saying that, but she has apparently been pressuring the gallery to take it down. The problem is that her doing that and trying to bury it has now ensured that many, many, many more people have seen it, both in real life at the gallery, which is reporting an increase in visitors to the exhibition, and on social media, where the story has now reached US talk shows and Time magazine.
Here's a photo of the woman. Now, can we see the portrait? Why would you want that removed? Can we see them both again? Oh, I see why she's mad. They left off the pearls.
I gotta say, I'm no art expert, but in this portrait, I believe the artist really captured her expression at the moment she saw this portrait.
And now an Australian comedian, Dan Ilic, says he wants to crowdfund getting the portrait beamed up in Times Square. But if you've just seen the story in passing, you might need a little bit of context, I think. The first bit of important context, the painting is by renowned First Nations artist Vincent Namatjira, who comes from an iconic line of Indigenous artists and whose work is celebrated around the world. He's exhibited all over the world. And more important context is that Gina's portrait is not like a standalone work. There's not just one massive portrait of Gina Rinehart. It's part of a work called Australia in Colour, which is a grid made up of lots of prominent and powerful Australians and people from around the world. They include Adam Goodes, Ned Kelly, Julia Gillard, ScoMo, Kathy Freeman, the late Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, King Charles, and the artist himself.
I thought it was interesting on the National Gallery of Australia website, they describe Namatjira as a celebrated portraitist and a satirical chronicler of Australian identity. I think that's important. And they also say his paintings offer a wry look at the politics of history, power and leadership from a contemporary Aboriginal perspective.
Yes.
So I think that context is really important because it is satirical. It's like caricature type portrait.
And the portraits are about Namatjira. The portrait isn't about Gina Rinehart.
Yeah.
It's about Namatjira and how he sees the world and how he sees power, which is the whole point.
All the other people who have their portraits included in this grid have not taken umbrage and asked for them to be removed, that we know of.
And it's not the first time that Gina Rinehart's tried to buy one of Namatjira's works to take it out of circulation. She did the same thing back in 2018 and she was also unsuccessful. And also this week she's released, or her company have released, a portrait of her that they like. And what's really interesting is that I think it's AI generated because it's based off a photo, and when you put them together, it just looks like, you know, those apps you can get where you just make a photo look like a painting. It's basically that. And it's her gazing out over the Pilbara region and she's got a Cooper on, and when they released it, they didn't credit any artist. It all comes back to AI.
A portrait isn't a selfie for Hinge. Like, a portrait is a representation. And when you're a figure of power or a celebrity, I'm not sure you would call that, but definitely a public figure who warrants interrogation and warrants criticism. Like,
lots of people are saying it's not even a portrait. It's an image. Like, they're not really meant to be portraits in the traditional context of like, sit down and let me paint a portrait of you. They're a representation of an opinion in this case, right? Which is why a certain section of people have taken this with much glee, including Dan Ilic, who wants it beamed up in Times Square, because Gina Rinehart, Australia's richest woman, one of the richest people in the world, is a very, very controversial figure, right? For a start, she's made her fortune from mining, which isn't exactly environmentally friendly. And she's notoriously conservative, as mentioned before. And her father is on the record as putting forward incredibly distressing opinions about Indigenous people, including that they should be involuntarily sterilised.
Can you explain how Swimming Australia is involved? Because I saw some swimmers releasing statements and I found that very confusing.
So Swimming Australia entered the chat. It was actually Swimming Queensland who entered the chat because Rinehart, one of the things she does do is she donates a lot of money to swimmers, right? She's a big, big fan of the pool and what it says about Australia. So she is one of the biggest supporters of Australian swimming, and she apparently gives tens of millions of dollars and directly to swimmers too, in terms of like making sure they can sustain themselves. That's a very popular thing in the swimming world.
Do you remember a couple of years ago, she was also a big funder of the Australian women's netball team, the Diamonds. And there were some people in that team who were not comfortable because of these comments that her father had made and wanted her to disavow her father and his comments publicly.
Which she wouldn't.
Otherwise, they didn't want to wear the logo of her company. She then withdrew all her money from Netball Australia, which sent them into a financial crisis.
So Swimming Queensland have said that they have written a letter to the Australian National Gallery asking that it be removed. So the boss of Swimming Queensland, Kevin Hasseman, has said, having seen the portrait myself, it made sense that we would respectfully, and I emphasise respectfully, contact the gallery, make them aware of the way that we were perceiving it, and hope that they would consider taking it down. Now, the gallery, to Rinehart's request, to Australia Swimming requests, all these requests have said, no, it won't be coming down. This is a major, important piece of Australian art and it stays where it is. What do we think about the furore, about the idea of it being beamed up in Times Square? What do we think?
Did you say furore?
Furore.
Furore.
Furore. I can't talk today. Something's happened to me.
No,
As they look,
is your HRT working?
Maybe not.
this is a story. It begins as a story about power. I think that's where the glee is coming from, and I actually quite respect that, and I have found fun in that part of the story. So you've got Gina Rinehart, Australia's richest woman, who is saying, I want that removed. And she is saying that to an Indigenous artist. Now, history, context means that that is a very loaded thing. Like, to think that her own vanity or her own, whether I think that's a nice picture of me, should take any precedence over a man's artwork seems kind of ridiculous. And of course, when we talked about the Streisand Effect, that refers to Barbara Streisand in 2003. There was an image of her home and she went, I don't want anyone to see that image of my home. And of course, it just was published everywhere.
Because she took legal action against whoever published this image.
And now it's known as kind of a media effect, whereby if you tell people not to look at something, you will amplify it off the charts, which is exactly what's happened here. I've seen people sharing it and I've thought that some of the commentary is very, very funny.
Well, hang on, you say very, very funny.
Yeah.
There's also a misogynist undertone to this, isn't there? Or maybe misogynist is the wrong word, but I think a lot of people have taken glee in talking about that they think Gina Rinehart's ugly. I find that a bit distasteful, right?
That's where I have found the twist with the Times Square thing. I'm finding discomfort in it and I'm very happy to be challenged on this. But Dan Ilic, who's the guy behind it, he's a comedian, and he did an incredible campaign a few years ago at the COP26 summit where all the world leaders were coming in to talk about climate change, and this was in Glasgow, and he got the billboards and he just basically put up funny satirical billboards about Australia's climate policy, like a joke about, hey, look at our koalas, they're nearly extinct. We're going to hit our targets by 2,000, 3,000. We're not going to hit them, basically. And it was to shame Scott Morrison. It was after the bushfires and it was really smart and it was political satire, right? And he's behind this. And I've listened to his interview and I don't think that he's a bad guy. But when you take this portrait out of the context of Namatjira's set of images, out of the context of what he's trying to say in a very specific gallery in Canberra, then what is your intention? The intention of putting that image of Gina Rinehart up is for the passers-by who don't know who she is to laugh at a woman that they think is unattractive. Like, that's really what it's about, which I don't think is kind to Namatjira. I think it's actually not
and that was not the intention of his work.
Wasn't his intention. No. So you're kind of misrepresenting what he was trying to do. And I do think there's an air of misogyny in that, because her saying remove this portrait and Australians sharing it, I don't think that's misogynistic. I think that that's just...
That feels sort of quite Australian, which is like... all the money in the world, you are powerless in this situation and we are going to take the piss.
It's a critique on power.
That's the most well-meaning interpretation.
Yeah. But the Times Square thing, Holly, am I wrong? Because I looked as well and Namatjira hasn't commented on the Times Square thing and I don't know how he'd feel about it.
My position on the Times Square thing is that if Namatjira is okay with it, then I'm okay with it. Like, if he's happy for that piece of art to be taken out of context and put there, then it's absolutely fine. Because I get your point about this feels something icky about the idea of pointing and laughing at a picture of a woman that she doesn't like.
Yeah.
But not everything, because it happens to a woman, is about being a woman. Like, Gina Rinehart is so powerful in our nation and around the world. That's why she's asked for this to be taken down, right? She lives in a universe where she dictates the terms and she gets to dictate how she's seen, and she's not used to being told no. Certainly not, in any kind of national institution where she thinks she has a lot of say. I think she is, because of that, 100% fair game when it comes to satire.
Yeah.
I don't think it's mocking or bullying, because I think that the art is part of a much bigger piece, as discussed. And I don't think that just because she's a woman, this has anything to do with her face being female.
All right,
You can open any newspaper and see really unflattering depictions of male politicians, male businessmen. I'm not so naive as to suggest I don't think that misogyny exists in art and depictions of powerful women. We can also give you lots of examples of that. But when it comes to this particular thing, I don't think that's what it's about. And I don't think we should try and twist ourselves into knots about that.
I'm watching the American talk shows and I'm thinking, okay, this is a 70-year-old woman who doesn't fit into the very narrow beauty ideal of what, you think women should look like. And I guess I'm kind of bristling at that. But let's pretend
in the hierarchy of the world's evils, and I'm the first person to say how much I can't bear women being mocked for aging or being mocked for not fitting beauty standards. But I think in this instance, I don't think that that's what this is about.
Okay, but if we're thinking about the tone of our conversation and mainstreaming trolling or bullying, if this was Donald Trump, remember when Donald Trump came up and people started going, ha, 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 look at your stupid fake tan, look at your hair, and we became really mocking of things that
hang on. That's different. That's very different to this, because he started that conversation. He routinely demeaned people, particularly women, based on how they looked.
But do we do that back? Is that how we behave? Especially when it's like a public conversation. No, should we be holding ourselves to a higher standard where we don't mock people for how they look?
I agree with you. I feel like, going on about Donald Trump's orange face and his tiny hands, it's the least of our problems, right, when it comes to how dangerous Donald Trump is. It's petty and immature. In this instance, it is incredibly petty and immature for a person as powerful as Gina Rinehart to be making such a fuss about this portrait.
So if this portrait was of Margot Robbie, right? And I know that she doesn't have the same thing. But what I'm trying to say,
I reject that whole
hypothesis. If it was
hypothesis.
Of someone who was traditionally beautiful, we wouldn't be having as much fun with it, is what I'm trying to say. When we laugh at this image, when Americans laugh at this image, what are we laughing at? Are we laughing at a woman who is not beautiful, and are we okay with ourselves in that?
I'm not. What I'm laughing at is the fragile ego of somebody so powerful who cannot handle even a skerrick of perceived criticism. It's ridiculous. This was part of a really important artwork, and she's made it about her face. She has.
After I'd recorded one of my 5-minute getting ready monologues this morning to post on Instagram, I read an article on Psychologies about how in 2024 we seem to have lost the art of conversation, thanks to new forms of communication that have taken hold over the past few years, like texting and emails, voice notes, and social media posts. We've massively reduced how much time we speak to other people in real time, in real life. So basically there are two forms of communication. There's asynchronous, which is not live, and that means that you are talking to someone in the form of you say something and then they say something whenever. You're not doing it in real time. So it might be a letter, it might be me saying something on Instagram and you commenting, voice note, text, all of those kinds of things. The other one is synchronous communication, which is live. Like if you're texting live with someone and you're both going back and forth at the same time, or you're talking on the phone or in Zoom or in person. Now, the rise in asynchronous communication is really changing the way that we interact when we're actually with other people in real life or even on the phone. This article that was written by a psychologist said, whether it's performative point scoring, people talking over one another, or just blanking, it feels that no one is really listening to one another anymore. And with that, we are losing nuance and enrichment in our lives and compounding feelings of isolation, even in the company of others. It's no surprise that the World Health Organization has declared loneliness a global public health concern. It's as though people are glitching. The monologue seems to have taken hold. Now, the way that this is showing up is an intolerance for interruption that you may have noticed in yourself or others, and also a lack of the conversation muscle that requires that give and take that you have in normal communication. Mae Martin is a Canadian comedian whose recent stand-up, Mae Martin's Sap, was on Netflix. They talk about how human interactions have changed and how basically we all have our own snow globes that we just want to show each other. Have a listen.
Okay, this is a little abstract, but don't you think that, in a way, our brains and our minds are like our rooms, and we furnish our minds with experiences that we collect to then build what we think of as our identity and ourselves. And that's all we're doing, is we're little like experience hunters collecting these to put them on our brain shelves and be like, I'm me. I'm like, and I always visualize every experience that we collect is like a little novelty snow globe, you know, and we're just going around being like one time I saw Antonio Banderas at the airport. Yes, I did. And myself, and no one else is me. And then all human interaction is, I really noticed this coming out of the pandemic, is all human interaction is just basically taking turns showing each other our snow globes and being like, and it's just pathetically taking turns. And like, someone will be showing you their snow globe, you know, and you're trying to be a good listener. It's like a story about a party they went to 5 years ago, and you're like, yes, and you're like, and you are you as well. You're like, yes, exactly, yes. How wonderful to be yourself as well. But the whole time, your eyes are just darting to your own shelf, 100% the whole time. You're like, yes, well, no, and yes, waiting for your moment to be like, and me as well, I have one.
This is so relatable. The snow globe thing as well. I think it has a lot to do with our attention span and how, if you consider how we spend a lot of our time, which is going on to some sort of feed where we watch a video, and if it doesn't capture our attention in less than 1 second, then we flick off. To then get into a conversation where you take a while to warm up to your story, our brains aren't wired like that anymore, because we're like flick,
boring.
Flick, boring. And the other thing I reckon is impacting our ability to have a conversation, which didn't come up in the article, but Siri and AI. The way I speak to Siri, it's not that I'm rude to her, but I'm demanding things of her all the time. She has no snow globe.
Oh, wow.
So if we are in frequent communication multiple times a day with things that have no snow globe, so therefore we don't give a shit about their snow globe.
Yeah.
I don't know if people have had this experience where you're speaking to a bot for a bank or something. Like I'm on my thing and I'm speaking, and then you start talking like a robot. And it's like, my account not working. Like, I start speaking like something.
And you're always ruder.
Yeah, you're always more rude. That's got to impact how we converse with others, right?
That's terrifying.
Yeah, because I think
my children laugh at me because I say please to Alexa in our house. But it's because I'm like, it only just occurred to me, but I don't want to normalize that around them in particular. So
but we just yell demands at
just
things.
yell demands at things all the time. And so they laugh at me that I do talk to her like she's a person. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I do. I'll be like, what's the time, please? Can you set a 10-minute timer, please?
Because it should be a muscle, right?
Well, that's why I'm trying to make it a muscle. But it's so interesting that they don't have a snow globe. But the other thing that made me such an aha moment with the snow globe comment is that I don't know that this is necessarily a new thing, because anyone who has ever dated men knows that they will have probably been in many situations where you go out for dinner with them and it's literally just a process of them pulling all their snow globes out of their pockets and putting them on the table and talking you through all of them, and they never once ask to see your snow globe, any of them. They are not interested in your snow globes. And so we know those people, and then we also know people who, when you're trying to tell them about something profound that's happened in your life and you're telling them about your snow globe that you're living in at the moment, they immediately go, yeah, that's exactly like the time that I was in my snow globe. And you're like, snow globe, shut up. Like I find this very useful, because all people who are really good listeners and people who will tell you what people really want to hear when they're in crisis or they need help is they need you to shut up and listen. They don't need you to tell them how you entirely understand how they felt because you also once had the same snow globe.
You know those people, and I suspect I might be one of them, that is just waiting for a pause in the conversation to inject a story about how they also had that experience or had a similar thing or what happened to them. The other thing I've noticed is I noticed it about people of a certain age. Like, there's a fastness of conversation and a banter that when you get to a certain age, you're not comfortable with that. And I also notice that there's a certain type of person who's used to having power who doesn't like being interrupted. I wonder if we're all losing our ability to be interrupted, because on social media, nobody interrupts you. I mean, I literally talk for 5 minutes. But having said that, there are people who have podcasts that talk for 90 minutes. They just monologue. And any form of posting on social media is a monologue, even if you're just posting one thing. It's not about active listening. It's about passive listening and monologuing.
The normalization of a monologue, it's not how humans have evolved to process and understand information. Like, we're meant to be doing that in a very kind of coordinated way with others, where we're challenged and where nuance springs up.
Because do you know what else Siri doesn't have, and what social media doesn't have when you're broadcasting, is it doesn't have someone's facial expressions when they're hearing it. This is why people can be horrendous on social media, because you would not say that to someone's face, because you would see their reaction. You would see them be shocked or hurt or angry in response, and that would modify or inform how you kept talking. But that's why people are so shouty on social media, particularly lately, when they're just shouting and being so polarizing. Because if you were actually face-to-face with that person, or saying this in a room full of people, you would take social cues from the horrified expressions on the faces of the people around you. And there are people that are on social media that aren't getting those cues. They clearly don't spend a lot of time away from their phones, and they're just going.
You would also take stock of the room.
And if people were bored, you would notice as well.
Exactly, but take stock of the room and everyone's personal experiences. If I'm having a conversation with someone who I know has had a miscarriage, that changes how I converse, whereas on social media, obviously, you can't.
Or if you're telling a story and that you can see in their face that it's hitting something for them, and you can kind of start backpedaling a bit and go, oh, well, you know, how about that rain? But you can't do that.
Or someone might interrupt you.
Paying attention, exactly.
Yeah. I've also found my brother, who's been working in male prisons lately, and a lot of what they do is about the art of listening. And he said a lot of things that he almost finds quite obvious, but to me, I have found surprising, about over-relating and how bad that can be. So, for example, a lot of these men haven't said much about their story before. And so they'll start telling a story and they'll get to a bit maybe about addiction. And then someone thinks, oh, I really want to encourage them to keep talking about their addiction, so I'm going to jump in with my story about addiction. And you totally derail their train of thought.
With your snow globe.
He's also said that what people tend to do is pick up, if Holly and I are having a conversation, by interrupting, I might actually pick up on something you weren't getting at. So you said that in passing, but that's not really part of your story. That's not where you were going. But I keep derailing because I'm making your story about me, which isn't how any of us, like if you think about therapy, that's about letting you come to your own conclusions and the power of silence. But we've become so intolerant of silence as well. And I've found I do this, especially with my brothers. I become quite dominating because I take on the mental load of the whole conversation. So with any silence, I fill it.
Same.
Therefore, I dictate the agenda of every conversation.
I just insane. Look at my snow globe. I do that too, Jessie. I also do that too.
But it means that there are people
Silence
that you never get to know.
move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You never get to know them because, and that's what this article said, is it talked about different conversation styles in colours. Like there's a green, there's a red, there's a blue, there's a purple. And, you know, it might not be that the person interrupting is trying to be rude, but their way of relating to you can really conflict with other people's way of sitting back and listening. But the snow globe thing as well, I've thought, sometimes, you know, you get quite taken by your own stories and how interesting you are. And sometimes I sit there and go, if I think my snow globe is interesting, how wild is it that everyone has their own snow globe full of interesting stories? And imagine how much more interesting would conversations be if I wasn't mining my old snow globe that I have looked at a lot.
I'd rather hear other people's stories because I talk all day at work. I get really sick of the sound of my voice. So I'll go see my friends and they're like, tell us about blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, tell me what you've been doing. I want to hear what you've been doing.
Tell me anything.
There's nothing interesting. I've got nothing interesting left to say. Let's just be honest.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, we drop new segments of Mamamia Out Loud just for Mamamia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get your daily dose of Out Loud, and a big thank you to everyone who is already subscribed.
Hi. How you doing? It's really nice to meet you.
Have you two seen the 2013 movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix?
I have not actually, because it scared the shit out of me, just the premise of it, so I blocked it out.
Mia, I think it would. Top 5 movies I've ever seen.
Really?
It's so good.
Now I
It's so
need
good.
Scarlett
to.
Johansson's the voice of the love.
I love
Yes.
Scarlett
Interest.
Johansson.
So it's about a man who develops a romantic relationship with an artificially intelligent voice assistant. And we only ever hear her voice, and it's Johansson, so it's a very distinctive.
This was way before its time, right?
Yeah. Even artificial intelligence. I don't think we barely even heard of that.
Siri didn't exist yet.
No, it didn't. And it's this brilliant film, and at the time it felt prophetic. And it turns out that 11 years later, life is imitating art. You see, Scarlett Johansson, famous actress, is today very, very pissed off. The 39-year-old released a statement after OpenAI, responsible for ChatGPT, among lots of other artificial intelligence, launched an AI voice that eerily resembles Johansson's. For a bit of context, here's a reminder of what her voice sounds like.
Dirty Dancing was like such a formative part of my youth. I think it was Patrick Swayze and David Bowie in Labyrinth when I was like, oh, sexuality. Like, I was like opened my eyes to like some other thing. I think Patrick Swayze and David Bowie both look great in extremely tight pants.
such a good voice, and she's always so dry and funny. I am a big fan.
Now, this is her written statement that she released today. It's read out loud by the AI. So this is the voice assistant version created without her permission, but these are her words.
Last September, I received an offer from Sam Altman, who wanted to hire me to voice the current ChatGPT 4.0 system. He told me that he felt that by my voicing the system, I could bridge the gap between tech companies and creatives and help consumers to feel comfortable with the seismic shift concerning humans and AI. He said he felt that my voice would be comforting to people. After much consideration, and for personal reasons, I declined the offer. 9 months later, my friends, family, and the general public all noted how much the newest system named Sky sounded like me. When I heard the release demo, I was shocked, angered, and in disbelief that Mr. Altman would pursue a voice that sounded so eerily similar to mine that my closest friends and news outlets could not tell the difference.
That's wild.
How creepy is that? And
So that is not Scarlett Johansson. Like as in, it's not a version of her. That is Sky, who apparently has nothing to do with Scarlett Johansson.
nothing to do with Scarlett Johansson. But something very strange happened just 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, is Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, he published a tweet, just 3 words, and the tweet read, her, like the film.
He's a big fan. So when he reached out to her agents, it's not a coincidence that they wanted Scarlett Johansson because he's a big fan of the film, loves Scarlett Johansson, and they really wanted this AI voice to be warm and sort of friendly and approachable and a bit sexy and flirty,
Here's my theory that no one asked for. My theory is that they went ahead and made it, and then they were like, I think we need Scarlett Johansson's signature on the dotted line.
2 days before they reached out to her agent and said, hey, do you want to reconsider, please?
Please.
She hadn't even got that message, or she hadn't got back to them to confirm her no. And then suddenly it was launched.
This comes out.
Been taken down now.
It's been taken down, and they say that it's a different voice actor who has nothing to do with it.
Explain to me a little bit, because I know you're an expert. You were on Q&A talking about AI, so you're really our resident expert. I know you were shitting yourself the whole time.
That was a fun watch.
Someone was going to ask you something like scientific.
How it works?
You're like, But my question is just this so that we understand. Like, to create a fake voice, an AI voice. In my mind, it's like a little AI monster that's like, You basically feed in real voices that you want it to sound like, or a real voice that you want it to sound like, and it goes away and like munches it up and spits out the fake one. And that was the fake one.
Exactly. And the technology for replicating voices has existed for a while. There are news channels around the world where you have anchors who read out the news who are AI generated. So they can get on Instagram and
say... Their images as well.
Their images as well. And they're talking... They're not perfect, but they're not far off. For example, it could be us 3 and we could say, in today's news, Scarlett Johansson, blah, 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 and it's AI generated. So that technology has existed. The awkwardness here is about its likeness
Then we could stay in bed.
Well... Mia, it's interesting, right? Because
yes, I could stay in bed, but then I wouldn't get paid.
There isn't a media company in 2024 who is not grappling with the ethics, the possibilities of artificial intelligence.
Well, I'd say there isn't a business or there isn't an organisation. It's not just media. It's not just business. It's people. It's everyone is starting to think, oh, what does this mean? And it's like the Pandora's box has been opened. We can't shut it. And we're really only starting to think about a lot of these things now. Remember a few weeks ago on the show, we talked about that woman who used voice-generated AI to replicate the voice of her dead husband?
Yeah.
And she found this piece of software online, and I think it was perfectly legal, and she fed in all of these messages and voice notes and videos and all of these things that he'd done. And it could then talk to her. She talked to it for a bit and then she went, I'm going down a very bad place here, and deleted it all. But in most of these business ones, you need signed permission from any voices of anybody that you import.
Like Scarlett Johannson.
Yeah, like Scarlett Johannson. And, there are so many ethical considerations, and it's tricky, right? Because, of course, AI is going to be disrupting all sorts of industries, all sorts of situations and things that we haven't thought about. And I think that we're really going to see that in the US election, when there are going to be videos of people and, voices of people saying things that actually aren't true.
So part of something that happened, maybe it was last year, is certain voters got a phone call from Joe Biden saying, don't vote in this election. And of course, that wasn't Joe Biden's real voice.
Or it might be a AI-generated robocall of Taylor Swift, or a video of Beyonce or of Tom Brady saying, here's who you should vote for.
And
it's terrifying.
Our sanity as a species is dependent upon a shared reality, is that we can all sit here and go, this is a microphone and that's a ceiling and these are some sort of facts. Like, yes, we can dispute facts, but an understanding of what is real and what is not.
I understand why everybody's freaking out. Yes, for all the reasons that you spelled out, Jessie, about like, how do we know what's real? But also tech companies, as we have seen, the big tech companies, and OpenAI is part of that, are not generally known for making purely altruistic decisions about only creating things that are good for the world. And nor should they, right? They're businesses, but they are now the richest and most powerful people in the world. And the idea that you're going to need fewer and fewer and fewer people to make and do anything, particularly in the creative space, but not only, but that's what we're talking about right now with the Scarlett Johannson story. You're not going to need a celebrity to voice anything because you just can make one. You don't need most of the behind-the-scenes people on a movie anymore because you can just create it all on a computer. You're not going to need actors. This is what the actors' strike was partly about. I entirely understand that, the discomfort that everybody has, because
of course,
how much of the profits of these enormous businesses did these people have to hold on to?
What I want to know from all of this is, obviously there's not a company, not a person grappling with the ethics of AI and where to from here. And in a way, I'm just really glad that Scarlett Johannson, because she's obviously got the power, she's got the means to go, hang on, I'm going to sue here and you better take my voice down. Is this a bad PR move for OpenAI? Because it's like they're not understanding that people are very scared and that creators are getting defensive. I read something in the New Yorker, I think, that was like, this makes OpenAI look desperate and like a bit of because it makes it look like it's almost a bit of a gag, like a bit of a publicity stunt to do the Scarlett Johannson thing and to draw on the movie Her, and like they're borrowing from sci-fi. Like, I don't know if this looks good for them.
I think most people just want their life to be easier. And if AI can make my life easier, genuinely, I don't think people care who it is or what it sounds like. I totally get Scarlett Johansson's concern, and she's completely right to take the legal action that she has. But there are so many ethical issues around voice mimicking technology with AI.
It's interesting to prosecute why they wanted this voice to sound like Scarlett Johannson, right?
Yeah.
They don't want their AI voices to sound like robots, like we used to think robots sounded like. They want her to sound like someone you like, someone you trust, and someone you want to be with. And that's really interesting because it kind of suggests that we're kind of mimicking humans, and that's scary because the words that they're going to come out of the robot's voices, who's responsible for them, who's fact-checking them, who's giving permissions to them. When I've read a lot about AI and listened to a lot of shows about this seems to be the fear. People aren't saying let's go back to some kind of horse and cart era and not let people innovate, but they're saying that these tech companies are very, very, very powerful. And as we've just seen with all of what's been going on with the court cases around social media and possible restrictions we need to put on that, maybe instead of doing that after the fact this time, we do it before the fact by doing things like declaring that this voice isn't real and all of those kinds of things.
To me, the concern is that the legislation, as with all of this, is just too late. It's years too late. So even if Scarlett Johannson does sue, I'm not sure that the legislation exists to protect her. And what's happening in the US with these tech companies is that they've put a lot of pressure on the government because they've said, if you start legislating this stuff, you're going to slow this whole industry down while the industry in China booms. We're in an arms race when it comes to artificial intelligence, and then we fall behind. And so they want to keep in the Silicon Valley, US world, they want to keep it really, really competitive so that they have a head start with all this technology. What that means is that, there's no ownership. Even when ChatGPT comes out, it's like, everything any human has created is now just open source, which has never happened in all of human history.
Like all books and all songs and all podcasts all be helmed by AI. So I should disclose that Mamamia, we have been looking at using AI, and we've just launched our own AI-powered voice called Sam that is available to read certain ads when humans don't have the time or the capability of reading them. But don't worry, our AI voice Sam will not replace our on-air talent in your favourite podcasts.
And it doesn't imitate any of our voices.
No, and we are not yet out of a job, which is good news.
Yeah.
It is.
And it declares itself as AI.
It always does,
We're putting our own ethics.
Yeah, I think human curation of AI is crucial. So Outlouders, Bridgerton, the new season is on Netflix. Everyone's obsessed. I have just caught up on season 2. But we invited Laura Brodnick, our entertainment editor, who spent time in a Bridgerton replica with the Bridgerton cast and knows everything about season 3, to come and debrief a little bit. Holly, not a fan, had some thoughts.
No, I loved season 1. Season 2, all right, a bit bored of season 3.
Anyway,
I haven't watched it, and I heard some of what Laura said, and I was very keen to listen. She's so smart. She said some very interesting things about how romantic comedies have changed and how Bridgerton gets away with more and why it gets away with it.
Yeah, it's true. Here's a sneak peek.
Yeah, I think the biggest criticism of rom-coms at the moment is that it feels like all the characters know they're in a rom-com in the movie because they're so aware of the tropes, and they discuss the tropes and then they discuss the lessons. The lessons and stuff. So it's even writers now can't sit down and just write a straight romance because there's so much influence. And then if you go back to a period drama, it's almost so cheesy and so sugary that they believe the romance, and then all of a sudden you give yourself permission.
And you can listen via a link in our show notes.
And Outlouders, before we go, wherever you're listening to us, give us a follow so that we drop into your feed every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, unless you're a subscriber, and you'll be getting 5 episodes a week. We are going to talk on Friday's episode about a documentary that is currently #1 on Netflix. If you have time to watch it, highly recommend. It is called Ashley Madison, Sex, Lies and Scandal. It's a 3-parter. We are going to be talking about the ethics, the story, the hacking. You might sort of remember it, but if you've got time in the next few nights, go and watch it. It's on Netflix.
Outlouders, thank you for listening to Mamamia Out Loud. Come back on Friday when I think we might be talking about cheating, and I have possibly the most petty recommendation of all time. This episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman, with audio production by Leah Porges. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do it. There's a link in the episode description.